When I first started in land, I was taught to go after property owners who lived out of state and were tax delinquent. But is that right? Certainly, we should seek to direct our limited marketing dollars to the most target-rich audiences. But how do we really know when a person is distressed? Or why? We hear all the time these days about algorithms and data mining. Some retail companies can now tell if women are pregnant and how far along they are based on their purchase histories. What if we could do that for land? Today on the Land.MBA podcast, David and I are going to discuss data strategies to ensure that you never miss that next home run deal. Are you ready to launch your success in the land business? If you are, I want to tell you about the Land.MBA Accelerator program. So many programs teach theory and process, but leave it up to you to figure out how to execute. The Land.MBA Accelerator program is different than anything else out there because it doesn't just teach you what you need to know, it drives you to turn knowledge into action. The Accelerator is an intensive 6-week small group coaching program built on top of our end-to-end video course that goes deep on the most important topics like county selection, pricing, marketing, and more. If you're ready to stop talking and start doing, go to land.mba/accelerator to sign up for a free discovery session to see if the accelerator is right for you. We still have a couple of seats open for our next session starting September 15th, but they will fill up fast, so don't hesitate. Go to land.mba/accelerator today. Hello, all you beautiful entrepreneurial land investors. So glad you took time from your day to spend with us. We are honored. We're still riding a huge high after the incredible panel discussion we had last week with our incredible panelists, Seth Williams, Joe McCall, Justin Sleva, Eddie Speed, and even David Van Steenkist. He was pretty good too.
You know, I got to jump in there. You keep screwing Justin's name up.
I said
Sliva.
That's what I said, and he corrected me and said it was Sleva.
Oh, I guess it is Sleva. I should know that. Everybody always pronounced it Silva.
Well, if he's listening right now, Justin, please call David and berate him for getting it wrong.
You're right. It is Sleva. Nobody screws up Van Stinky ever, so.
No. So if you do want to watch that full replay, it is available. I did send emails out to everybody on our list, plus there's Facebook posts going out where you can access the replay to that. Absolutely worth it. If you only saw it on the Facebook or YouTube Live, you only saw the beginning of it, and all the good stuff at the end was not there. So I strongly encourage you to watch the full replay to get the full value out of that. Also, if you would, we would be so grateful if you would like, subscribe, and comment. And in the comments, we would really love it if you would post a comment that said, you know, I'd really love to hear you talk about this, or I have this question. I would love it if you guys could answer this question for us, and we will answer those questions on the podcast, and it will give us some great ideas for future topics that we will address as well. So. And of course, the subscriptions really help us with the rankings and make our ability to provide great content to you all the better. So please do. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, data, and why you may be missing big deals because of data. What do you think, Dave?
Good topic. I keep seeing, similar correspondences on social media, Facebook and whatnot about, tax delinquent list and filtering out LLCs or trusts, etc. So we want to kind of, not set the record straight, but set the record straight on our opinion when it comes to this. But you know, it's really interesting today with marketing and what we can do with data and the way we can filter and sort and manipulate for demographics and psychographics, and especially online with people's click habits and things like that. So I know there's a great story, Howard, you were telling me about Target earlier. Why don't you share that story with our audience?
Yeah, I first heard this story back in around 2012, and so it's not new, but this is what if this is what they were able to do back then, imagine what they can do today. So Target was collecting oodles and oodles of data on all of their customers, and so what they did is they created essentially a customer ID, and they associated the credit card numbers, their email addresses, their names, everything with that customer ID. So anytime any transaction happened for an individual, they can associate it with a specific customer ID. And then when they looked across all of their data, and they had an awful lot of it, and they were augmenting it, by the way, with other sources of data, other transactional data that you can buy from American Express or Visa or whoever, they were able to mine this data to understand when they see certain transactions, transactional behaviors, they can associate it with certain kinds of life events. And then they had the ability at that time to send out custom coupon mailers. So if they felt like somebody was in a certain life event, they would fill that person's coupon book or the coupons in that mailer with coupons that were associated with that life event. Well, they sent one out to this gal in Minneapolis, and it was all filled with diapers and cribs and everything associated with having a baby. And it turns out that the person that they sent this to was a girl in high school, and her father saw it, and he's like, "What the heck is going on? Are you trying to tell my kid that she should be having a baby? She's in high school." So he went down to the local Target store and got the manager and said, "What is going on?" And he showed it to him, and the manager had no clue what was going on because, of course, this is all handled by central marketing. And he said, "I'll do some investigation. I really don't know the answer. I'm just gonna start and stop my video here for a second because I think I froze." And and so a week later, the manager calls the father back, and the father says, "Well, it appears that there have been some things going on in my house that I wasn't aware of. My daughter is due in August, and I owe you an apology." But what happened was is that by doing this data mining, Target actually knew that this girl was pregnant before her father did, and then sent her a booklet of coupons with a couple of interesting outcomes from that. One was that one really interesting thing is that they were not only able to determine whether a person was pregnant or not, but they were able to determine where in the pregnancy they were. So they noticed that when people, or women in particular, started having an increase in purchases of unscented lotions and like certain supplements like calcium and zinc, that means they were at about 20 weeks of pregnancy. And then there were other triggers based upon purchases where they realized they were getting much closer to the end of the pregnancy. Well, the kind of items that they might promote with coupons is different at 20 weeks versus it is at closer to 36 weeks. So anyway, they were able to do all this, and it's just amazing how accurate it was. The second interesting thing was that they realized that when we know something that they don't know, and then we tell them that we know it, and it turns out to be true, it really creeps people out. And maybe we shouldn't be doing that quite so obviously. So then what they started doing
Right.
is they changed the flyers so that they were mixing in things that they knew that people would have no interest in, like, lawnmowers and other things. And then they would mix in all the baby stuff in there so they'd see what they needed to see, but it was mixed in with other things so it didn't look like Target was targeting them. So that is
Right.
that is the power of data. And most of us, when we start in our land business, we hear this, people saying, well, you should really target either get a tax delinquent list or search for people who are tax delinquent and live out of state, because the probability, that's the low hanging fruit, and the probability is much greater that those people will be interested in selling. You'll get a higher positive response rate from your mailing efforts. And my personal belief is that that is absolutely true. Do you think it's true, Dave?
Well, yeah, you get a higher response rate for sure. You get a higher conversion rate, uh, but your list is so much smaller.
Right.
Versus if you target everybody in the county, um, regardless of those different situations, yes, you're going to spend more money on mail because now your list is going to be 5,000 pieces instead of 200 or 500 on the tax delinquent list. The other thing that has been my experience, because when I first started, I also used that technique. And yes, not only was my list a lot smaller, but I did get a very high response rate. But I also typically threw out 50 to 70% of those deals because um, you know, many times they're tax delinquent because people have moved around, the property got inherited, they moved around, and the tax bill hasn't been able to catch up with the right person. So, a lot of times there's title issues and all kinds of stuff that now, if it's a more expensive property and there's juice in the squeeze, then yeah, you do the quiet title and all of that stuff if you can. But if it's a lesser expensive property, then you just throwing that deal out and punting. Um, so yeah, you're, in my opinion, you're just because you can doesn't mean you should, because you're saving pennies and potentially losing thousands because you're excluding others in your list. Most of so I mail everybody most of the time, and tax delinquents are included in that. Um, and there's been, I would say 95% of my deals don't have any issues, and I know I can speak on the behalf of most of the people I know in this business too. Most of their good deals don't have any issues.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there was, in that initial advice that we received when we first started back in the day, one of it was people who live out of state, and the other is people who are tax delinquent. And it's interesting. So where I live in Connecticut, if I drive 5, 6, 7 hours in any direction, except east, which would put me in probably the Atlantic Ocean, um, I'll end up in another state and probably have to cross multiple states if I was to drive straight for that many hours. Um, if I was to drive 7 hours southwest from Denver, I'm still in Colorado. So
Right.
what out of state means in one part of the country is not necessarily what it means in another part of the country. And it also changes behaviors, right? So um, yeah, maybe from Connecticut, I would want a piece of recreation land in upstate New York. But if I'm from Denver, maybe I grab the wife and I say, "Hey, let's go check out Telluride. Let's go down to the Southwest." And you go
Hmm.
down there, and oh my God, it's so beautiful here. Let's buy a piece of land. And we'll put a cabin out here, and we'll have our own little vacation spot. And then you go 7, 8 hours back to Denver, and you have some kids and you have your job and you're busy and your friends and your social life, and before you know it, life gets in the way and you never go down there because it's 7 hours is a long time to drive, and you never build the cabin. And next thing you know, 20, 25 years has gone by and you've been paying taxes all the time because you're a responsible person, but you've never had any enjoyment out of that land. And you might very well be receptive to an offer on it, because you don't know how to sell it, because realtors generally aren't interested in a piece of land like that. So they're prime for us, and they are neither out of state nor are they tax delinquent.
Right. Exactly. And you come back to the same thing when whenever you build your list. I mean, I always check it I'll build my list for the criteria, acreage and all the different filters, and then I'll, just for curiosity, I'll set it for out of state, and many times it'll drop that list from thousands down to a couple of hundred. Not always. Sometimes it'll only maybe drop it in half, but it will significantly decrease the size of your list. Um, and I haven't done that particular filter enough, like to just mail out of state. I've never really tested it to see what my response rate is, but again, you're saving pennies to potentially risk not getting thousands. You're missing deals, because I've done, all lots and lots and lots of plenty of deals in state, and in fact even in county at times. Um, so
Yeah,
that's
I would say that there's out of state and then there's out of county. And there are a couple of rules that I think that make the land business so good. When we were on the call, when we were on the panel last week, I think it was Eddie Speed who said, "What makes the land business work so well is that it's such an inefficient market," and that is true. It works because we understand market pricing better than the people who are selling properties and better than the people who are buying properties. That is much harder to do when you're buying and selling with people who live in the county. People who are local and live there, they've lived there years or their whole life. They're probably, not always, but probably going to have a better pulse on the market than we will if we're investing from the other side of the country.
yeah,
So, but just to use that example that I gave you earlier, if I wanted to buy a property in the southwest of Colorado and I live in Denver, that is an out of county transaction for me. But
right,
that same distance where I live in Connecticut is clearly an out of state transaction. So
yeah,
out of county is really just as powerful as out of state, as far as, just getting away from local knowledge.
yeah. I mean, it is, but again, it's saving pennies to risk losing thousands.
Hmm.
Not losing, but not getting thousands, because again, if you the thing is, look, if you save a few $100s on a mailer, um, and you miss out on one deal, well, your ROI is negative on that. If you spend the few $100s more or the $1,000 more and get one more deal, even if hundreds of your offers went wasted, or just went onto deaf ears. If you got one more deal and made an extra 10 or 20 or 30 grand, you're going to be looking at that. Why in the hell am I being penny wise and pound foolish on my mailers, and taking more time to do it? Just spend the
And it
money,
doesn't
shoot
have
the
to be those
mail,
big,
send the text. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It doesn't even have to be those big numbers. I mean, when I first started and I was doing all those, the 5 acre squares down in Costilla County, I was buying them for about 800 and selling them for about 25 to 3,500. If I spend an extra thousand on the mailer, but I'm making an extra 2 to 3,000 on one transaction, that's enough to justify it. Forget it. And now
Exactly.
if I'm dealing with bigger numbers, all the better. So,
Yeah.
so this
Absolutely.
whole geography thing, out of county, out of state, I don't think really matters. Out of county kind of matters to me, but not so much. I don't know that I'm not particularly excited about mailing to people who are in county. I suppose I could, and the reason gets to now the other piece about this tax delinquency piece. What that really, it's not about whether somebody's tax delinquent or not. We make money by finding distressed opportunities. We're looking for people who are distressed and therefore would get a benefit, a positive benefit from getting rid of their property, even if it's at a relatively low price. Um,
Yep.
and the thing is, and this is absolutely critical, who are we to say when a person is distressed or why? We have no idea. So let me give you an example. So you've got people who are in a very difficult economic situation, let's say that they lost their job, and as a result, maybe they stopped paying taxes on their land as one of the cost-cutting measures that they're doing. That would be an example of distress, and the fact that they're not paying the taxes might be the indicator of that distress. However, what if it's a person who is very responsible and pays their taxes and would not think about not paying their taxes, but their child is about to head off to college and they're going to be hit with a huge tuition bill and they need to get some money. They need to start liquidating assets that are not that important to them. That is
Hmm.
also a distress situation, but there is no necessarily clear indicator based upon surface data, i.e., tax delinquency, that they're distressed. And we'll probably not know it unless we just mail to them and stimulate that conversation.
That's right. Or the grandma that wants to take the all the grandkids on a nice vacation and needs a little bit of extra money to pull it off, and is looking at this tax bill, and she got your letter and said, you know what? I haven't seen this property in 30 years, know nothing about it. My dead husband bought it. Um, and that's enough money to pull off this trip. Yeah, let's do it. So
So,
there's you never know what the reason is in somebody's life. Um, so just mail everybody. Eh,
well, the last point I'd make though is that the kind of data we typically get when we build our mailing lists, we're getting lists either directly from the county or through an aggregator like DataTree or CoreLogic or Black Knight, and so we're getting information about the property, but we're not getting a ton of information about the owner. We're getting a little bit, we'll get their mailing address and a few other things, but we're not getting data that helps us deeply understand their situation in life. In order to be able to do that, we would have to augment the data with other sources, which could be expensive potentially to do. And frankly, what made Target successful in that is that they built a data program. They had a data warehouse, and they were bringing data in from multiple sources, and they had, data analysts that were making sure the data was clean and that the right data was associated with the right customer IDs so that they could properly analyze it. And then they had statisticians and data miners who were able to go in and really pull out the trends in the leading indicators that say, well, if they buy these kinds of products at this point, there's an 80% probability that this is the stage of life that they're in. Um, for most of us, not there may be some really brilliant people out there in the land business who come from a data background and know how to do this and could do this, and it might be worth their while to do it. But for the average land investor, we have neither the access to that level of data nor the knowledge of how to mine it properly. And so because we know that one deal will justify all the excess mailing cost, chances are we're just much better off to mail everybody. The one question we always get asked, and I think Dave answered this a couple podcasts ago when he did an interview with one of his land partners, is should you include LLCs and businesses? That's another thing that a lot of people filter out. And since and even though you covered it, I think it's worth covering it again just because we're talking
yeah,
about filtering data. So I get it. I mean, if you filter out LLCs, chances are you're going to filter out a lot of the fellow land investors who you may not want to be mailing to. But David, is there a compelling reason to leave them in?
hell yes. Many, but as I podcasted about a couple of weeks ago with Jay Jacobson, a tax lien investor who holds all his liens and the properties that he takes back on the liens in his LLC. He and I have done 20 deals together. If I would have, and equating to hundreds of thousands of dollars of profit, and I'm buying another property from him that I'm going to do a buy and hold on, and we're going to talk a little bit about that property in the next podcast. Um, where I'm going to create lots of cash flow from that property. But if I had excluded LLCs, uh, businesses, I would have never made contact with him and done those deals. And I've got a couple of examples of that. I've got another uh, guy who had a bunch of his properties. He wasn't even a business, but over the year he was in the the oil business, and over the years he'd pick up tax delinquent properties here and there, and or just word of mouth and get really good deal. And he just collected land, and he happened to put it in his LLC. And I think I bought about a dozen properties from him in 3 different counties, including the county he lived in. And so there's just been I've bought a lot of properties from those guys. I get letters from other land investors, and I know they get mine. So who cares? Again, it's saving pennies to risk not making thousands.
Exactly. And I think one of the really interesting points you just made is that we normally send out mail with the intention of trying to find a property that we can purchase. But
Hmm.
sometimes what happens is we end up making a relationship that translates into a much larger amount of business than any individual property. Or we make a connection with somebody who actually owns hundreds of properties, maybe not even in the same state as the one you originally mailed in. And we did a podcast on this a long, long time ago with Trevor Hartsock,
Heartsuck.
where that happened to him. So you never know what's going to happen, but the more you put yourself out there, but the more you get your brand out there and make yourself known, the more opportunities that will manifest. So the risk that you take by holding back in order to save a few shekels, in almost all cases, is just not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. You just reminded me of another, talking about Trevor, another person who I know. I'll keep him anonymous, but uh, he uh, ended up buying, uh, we're partnering with the owner um, on 50 deals, and that was like the catalyst that really launched his business. And he's crushing it today. So um, I think we beat that horse dead. Market to everybody, guys. Now, one of the things I will do with regards to corporate owners, once I've downloaded the spreadsheet, I may go through it quickly just to see any obvious uh, land
Fellow.
investors who I know, and just manually take those out. And you don't have to do that. It takes a few minutes, depending on the size of your list. So that's how that's how I do it, and that's how I would do it. So all right, I think we're out of time, buddy. You got any
All
last
right.
words?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for your time today. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. We would like to know what you want to hear about. We will create podcasts around those topics. If you have a question that you'd like to get answered, we will answer it. And by all means, please do check out on our social media on land.mba, our groups and our pages for social media posts where you can access the replay of last week's panel discussion with all those great panelists. I think it's definitely going to be worth your while. Thank you so much. See you next time on the Land.MBA podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, had a bit of fun, and walked away with some actionable insights that you can apply to your business. Dave and I have got some great content and interviews planned, so don't forget to rate and review, and of course subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If we mention any interesting links or tools, you'll find them in the show notes. To learn more about Land.MBA, visit our website at, wait for it, Land.MBA. See you next time on the Land.MBA podcast.